Today we're going to be talking about two-way or three-way speakers. Now, if you've been looking at studio monitors or speakers of any kind really, you've probably noticed that the majority of them either have 2 or 3 drivers within them. And you've probably been asking yourself what the difference are between the two types and what the pros and cons are of having more or less drivers within your unit. So firstly, just a disclaimer, before I get bombarded by a load of audio experts. These videos are meant to be very light and digestible so that anyone with any level can understand the broad outer layers of the topics and get a rough idea of how things work and why. Due to this, I'm not going to delve into any of the intense physics or maths, meaning that some parts of the topics may be slightly oversimplified. I'm hoping to do a series of videos that will break down all of these topics further and include the science behind it, but that time is not now. So what's the reason for having multiple drivers? Well, due to wavelength, different sized drivers handle specific sections of the audio spectrum better than others. For example, low frequencies have very large wavelengths, which means they require a large amount of air to be moved to reproduce them. And to do this, you need a large driver. Which is why, say for your TV sound system, your subwoofer is usually the largest part. This is the opposite for higher frequencies, whose wavelength is much smaller, and therefore the driver has to be much smaller and lighter because it needs to be able to move very fast to accurately reproduce these frequencies. So all this means is that in two-way systems you have 2 drivers, a woofer for the low frequencies and a tweeter for the high frequencies. This is the same in 3-way systems, however you have an additional driver to handle the mid-range frequencies. This is known as the mid-range driver. And as you may expect, the size of this driver is somewhere between the larger woofer and the smaller tweeter. So, as we've discussed, there are different drivers for different sections of the audio spectrum. However, to reproduce the full spectrum, we need to combine these drivers into one multi-way system, which are your studio monitors that you can buy. Now, we can't just throw an audio signal at these speakers and expect them to accurately reproduce it. All the drivers would be trying to reproduce the full spectrum at the same time, and this would result in a mess of phasing and cancellations, and it would just sound terrible. So what we need to do is we need to split up the audio spectrum so that the low frequencies are sent to the woofer, the mids are sent to the mid driver, and the high frequencies are sent to the tweeter. Now, to do this, we used what is called a crossover. Now, crossovers are a pretty huge topic in themselves, so I'm not going to delve too much detail about them in this video, but the basics are that a crossover is essentially a filter that directs the appropriate frequencies to their corresponding driver. As you can see from this graph of a two-way system crossover, above or below a certain frequency, the filter rolls off. The point at which the two filters cross is known as the crossover point. Now, it can be seen that the crossover point for each driver is 3 dB down in relation to the flatter signal above. In this region, the acoustic output of both drivers sum together to flatten out that curve, making, in an ideal world, the frequency response of the system completely flat across the full spectrum. Now, I say in an ideal world because this never actually happens, but more on that in another video. So, returning back to our original point, crossovers are very difficult to set up, and for monitors to have a flat frequency response or tonal balance requires a lot of work and time. This meaning that 3-way crossovers tend to be more complicated to set up and to do well than 2-way crossovers, adding to their cost. So be wary of cheaper 3-way systems as they may not actually sound as good as a decent pair of 2-way speakers. Another issue that can occur in speakers or monitors is time alignment between the multiple drivers. The more drivers there are in a system, the greater potential of a delay to arise between them. A delay between drivers can cause problems such as comb filtering, which can result in frequencies getting cancelled out and the response of the monitor being altered. So again, 3-way systems tend to require more work to set up and calibrate as they can be subject to more timing issues. So you're probably thinking at this moment, well, what's the point in a 3-way system? It all just seems more hassle than it's worth. Well, there's also several issues with two-way systems. The problem with two-way systems is that the tweeter is tiny, usually about an inch wide. Although this is great for high frequencies, in a two-way system, the mid-range of the spectrum is also sent to the tweeter. This means that generally two-way systems are less efficient at reproducing the mid-range compared to that of a three-way system, where the results are much lower distortion in that frequency range. Another issue with two-way systems is that the crossover frequency in a lot of systems is set around 1K to 3K, which is quite a critical section of the audio spectrum, as it's where information such as vocals usually sit. Crossovers tend to create some form of phase distortion, which in a critical area such as the frequencies mentioned isn't really ideal. With a three-way system, the crossover frequencies are separated away, meaning this crucial area is less affected. So to conclude, there isn't really a perfect answer for what setup is better. It completely depends on your own preferences and requirements for what you need your system to do, which is why in some professional studios you can see them having three-way and two-way systems, and they can use the combination as they desire. Things to consider though is that three-way systems tend to be physically larger units than that of a two-way system. So if I was pushed to make a suggestion and you're just making music in your bedroom, a two-way system would be perfectly fine for you. But that's just my opinion. I hope you found this useful. Please drop me a like and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this, and thank you very much for watching.